Hello friends, Matt Rizek here from leatherpunk.com. Thank you so much for joining me today in part 2 for setting rivets. Now this video is going to teach you a lot more than just simply setting rivets. You guys are going to learn a lot in this video, and I know it's going to be a lengthy video, but by the time you're done watching it, I promise that you are going to be an expert in setting rivets. Now the first thing that I want to talk about, we're going to dive right in. By the way, I did shoot this video twice because I didn't like the way that my camera was focusing, so I wanted to be able to show you guys this stuff up close without doing separate cutaways, so you can see exactly how I do it unedited in live action. The first thing that we're going to talk about are some of the problems that come up with setting double capped rivets. The main problem that people talk about and mention to me is that the caps aren't staying on. So why is that happening to you, and what can you do about it? That's what we're going to help you out with right now. As we do, I want to take a step back into my first video on setting rivets, which, by the way, if you haven't watched that, you might want to watch that one first and then come back here and watch this as well. But in that first video, I want to just touch base on some of those things that I showed you, because if you aren't doing some of the basics, that could certainly contribute to why your caps are falling off. And that is a big problem if you're having that issue. So your work surface is very important. You need to have a solid work area. This is a square foot polished piece of granite. It's 1.5 inches thick and it weighs 25 pounds. Underneath it, I have glued to it some rubber backing so that it just keeps it safe, keeps it from breaking or anything like that. At a minimum, if you don't have this, you can use maybe a cinder block or something, you know, something really hard like a concrete block. If you're serious about leather, consider getting one of these. At a minimum, you will need this anvil, and yes, it's adorable. It weighs 2 pounds. You can pick one of these up on my website, leatherpunk.com. Follow the link below. I should have a few on my site. Now this anvil, this part here is called the face. This is the only part that you use in leathercraft. Even though it has this here, this is called a horn, this little notch is called the step. Neither one of these are used in leather. It just is there to kind of give you that familiar appearance that we're all used to from larger anvils. But so just the face. Now the next thing that I want to mention are your setting tools. The concave tools, remember I showed you that I have different, I've filed these down to different diameters so that my caps are getting set properly. If you are setting your rivets and you're getting that ring in the leather, that would tell me that some of the force isn't being directed into the cap, it's going into the leather, and it might not be setting correctly for you. So as I mentioned, you can file those down. By the way, I want to take a quick step back here, another step back, and bring the anvil back into the picture here. I do a lot of things with this anvil. So other than setting rivets, I'll show you one kind of nifty thing that I do. I don't think that the anvil warrants having its own special video, so we'll talk about it right now. But let's say, for example, that I want to round out the end of this strap. If you've seen one of these punch tools, that's what you would use to do that. Now, when you use this, sometimes the leather will shift over, and then you don't end up with a nice curve. So what I do with the anvil, you know, it has these holes down here if you want to mount it on a piece of wood, but I don't do that. I like to have it, I like to be able to move it around as needed, and I like to do this with it. I'll invert it, and the weight of it holds the strap there, and it doesn't leave any marks into the leather, and then I can take my mallet. Oops, one more hit. And there you can see it has a nice curved shape to it. Sometimes, like I said, it gets kind of off kilter and doesn't set right. Anyway, I digress. And don't worry, we're going to set a rivet right now just to kind of show you guys one more time. And then last, I want to talk about the mallet that you use in setting rivets. This here is what I consider to be a medium weight mallet. It weighs 11 ounces. When you're setting brass rivets, that's what these are made out of. They're silver in color, but that's just a nickel plating. Underneath that it is brass. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want a heavy mallet. So 11 ounces is a good weight. Now when I say heavy, when we get into something like this mallet here, this weighs a full pound, so 16 ounces. So this weighs just under 3/4 of a pound, and this one weighs a full pound. At 1 pound, I don't really like to set rivets with a mallet like this because I think it just crushes them too much. Which brings up my next point. I didn't talk about this too much in the first video. If you are using a metal hammer, like a carpenter's hammer, that's going to destroy your rivets and they won't set right. So you definitely want to stop using that if you are and get yourself a rawhide mallet. And so that's it. Let's talk more about that problem with the caps falling off. And as we do, I want to set a rivet just to show you one more time. Now the reason your caps are falling off is for one of two things. Either the post on your rivet is too short or it's too long. If it's too short, there isn't much you can do. You just need longer rivets. But let me at least illustrate what that looks like so you can tell, are my rivets too long or too short. So let's go ahead and set a rivet right now. And some of you guys mentioned, I kind of assumed that a lot of you knew how to set a hole into leather. And some of you asked me, well, how do you put the hole in? That's fine, we'll show you that too. That's kind of fun. And again, I don't think that setting a hole is something that deserves its own video, so we can squeeze that in here too. Now what I use is one of these. The end has changeable bits so that you can get the right size diameter for whatever it is that you're working on. The other option is a rotary. Now I have an antique rotary. You clamp it down. I've never liked these. I don't think they work that great. This one definitely doesn't work that great. It's probably 100 years old. But let's just go ahead and sometimes it helps to put a mark in there just to say, okay, do I like that? If you want to adjust it a little bit over to the left or right or up or down, you won't see that mark after you get everything set. So it's okay. So I kind of like that. We're going to just go with that. And it's as simple as that. You now have a hole in leather. So let's put our rivet, and remember we put the post on the bottom, so that's coming up. And look at how much of the post is sticking out. There's enough room there for another equal layer of material. Now I do this for a living, so I know that my rivets are going to work. At least they're going to work with the material. And what you have here is a nice little piece of the post protruding out the top. That's exactly what you want to see. If it's coming out too much, that's going to cause problems, and if it's too low, that definitely will cause you some issues. Let me show you what that looks like if I were to take a thinner piece of material. This isn't as thick as these two, but just to add a little bit more is all it takes. And now when I put my finger over here, I cannot feel any of the post. So if you cannot see or feel any of that sticking out the top, then you definitely are not going to be able to set that. I don't recommend that you shift your material to get that thinner so that your rivets work. I recommend that you get longer rivets. So let's take this piece back out and prepare to set it. Again, I want to illustrate one more thing. The opposite problem that you can have is if the post is too long. Now, in an ideal setting, pretend that this hand is a post. So there's the cap, this is the barrel on the post, and this hand is the cap. When you hit the rivet, or when you set the rivet, it's just supposed to go straight down. And this will sort of mushroom, the end of it will mushroom up inside of the cap. And that's what locks it into place. Now there's only so much room for that post. It can't hold an unlimited amount inside the cap. So instead of it going straight down, what can happen if the post is too long is it will shift over to the side. So your post gets bent and your caps are not directly on top of each other. That's a poorly set rivet, and for that problem there is a fix. So if you are working with rivets that are too long, I'm going to show you a really cool trick that you can do in one-off situations. So let's go ahead and set that rivet and let you see what a normal set rivet looks like. We're going to take the cap, we got the post on there, and that's sitting on there nicely, so we are ready to set that. And we'll use this concave tool. It has just a slight taper for these rivets. And that's it. It looks really nice. If we're using really thin material, rivets only come so short. You know, the post is only going to get so short. So here's your options. If we want to take this thin material here, let's say we're going to take and put them together, grain, flesh to flesh. So we got grain on both sides. And we want to put a rivet in here. If we try to do that, look at how much of that post is sticking out the top. That's a lot. When I go to put a cap on this, the cap is, you know, it's not seated. It's way too high. That is not going to set properly. So what we can do to fix that, take a look. I'll show you. We're going to cut, we're going to trim a little bit of this rivet. And I'm going to use this cutting tool. I'll talk more about this in just a second. You'll want to get one of these. And I just want to nip the end off and make sure you cut it straight. Make sure it's not at an angle. So make sure you're paying attention to that. And we just want to cut the very end of it off. Not much at all. And it's going to go flying, so don't worry. Piece breaks off. I could probably actually take a little bit more off. There we go. Now what I have to do here, this has been crushed, so it's flattened. We need to reshape this. So I'm going to use this and guide it back into a circular shape. Now when you go to put the cap on this, it's not going to want to slide on as easily as it did before you snipped it. So what you do is carefully sort of taper the top, taper that in, and that does help. Either way, you're still going to have, it's still going to resist, the cap is still going to resist going on. You can tap it lightly with your setting tool and get it into place. And I'm almost done here. I kind of like the way it looks. Yeah, it looks pretty nice. It's nice and circular again. So I'm going to feed that into here, into our thin little pieces. Sometimes it's kind of snaggled a little bit and kind of resists going through the holes, but you can get it through. That went through nicely. All right. Yeah, that looks pretty good. You can see how much is out the top. That's about right where we want it. And we'll see if the cap slides on. It pretty well went on. Okay. Yeah, that looks nice. Let's give it a hit. And that's beautiful. Looks really nice. You'll feel a bulge in here if there's too much post. And I can feel that this doesn't have that. So now the other option is to use a tubular rivet, and we'll talk more about that later in the video. But for one-off situations, if you have these long rivets and you just want to make it work, cutting the end of it, it really does work. Now before I show you the next item, I want to just take a little break and show you guys a bag of rivets and let you know a little bit about rivets. Now these are manufactured inside the United States. This is a complete set, so post and cap of these rivets that I just set. They're very expensive. This bag right here, these two bags, this is about $150 worth of rivets. There's probably at least 300, there's probably about 300 rivets in here. So yeah, they're not cheap, they're not free. Kind of nifty. All right, so next I'm going to show you how to remove rivets from your material, starting right now. Okay, so removing rivets, sometimes you will want to take a rivet out. Maybe it's an old rivet, maybe you dented the cap when you were setting it and you want to get it right. Sometimes there's some other part of the garment that you need to access, and taking the rivet off is required to do that. And so we want to take the rivet out in a way that leaves us with a usable, viable opening so that we can put a new rivet in. Now if you just want to rip everything apart, that's not hard to do. But if you want to take these out and set a new rivet, you need to do it in a special way. And I'm going to show you how I remove rivets. And remember that tool. This is something that I picked up at Ace Hardware. Working with leather, there aren't a lot of tools that fix problems. So there aren't a lot of tools that you can use that help you when you make mistakes. I've found that this is invaluable for certain mistakes that I make. So in taking rivets out, what we're going to do, we want to approach this from the post, not the cap. So turn it over. If you're not sure, if you didn't set the rivets and you're not sure which side is the post or the cap, make your best guess. So here's what we're going to do. Using both hands, I'm going to push down, and I want to get a good bite. And I'm not going to pinch all the way through. I'm just going to squeeze it a little bit and then turn it around and do the same thing on the opposite sides. And the idea here is that we're just fatiguing the metal enough that it just sort of crumbles apart, that the cap falls off, that the bottom of the cap separates from the post, and then the rest becomes a little bit easier. And I know this isn't easy to see, but there isn't much to see until I get this piece worked off. Now I could pinch it all the way through if I wanted to. I'm choosing not to. I'm trying to just kind of bend, reshape, and again trying to fatigue that metal. And now I'm starting to take more of it off. I'll move my hand there so you can see. And we're getting pieces of it off. Now, this metal, it's very, very important that you discard this. It can really scratch leather, a lot of leather very quickly, and you don't want to do that. And plus, if they land on the floor, they can hurt when you walk on them. There's a piece there, we don't want that left on there. So I have most of the cap sheared off, but I need to do a little bit more work here. And again, we haven't damaged any of the material in doing this. But I need to get some of the stuff that's still holding on and it's hanging over the hole. So we've got to get that kind of cleared out. And again, this thing works very well for that. Okay, I think I've taken about as much off as I can. Let's sweep that off one more time. And then I'll use my awl to kind of drive it out. See that? The hole is still good. Now it kind of hangs on to the top piece. What I do is I'll push that up so I get a little gap on the cap here, and then I'll use this again and pull it out. If it doesn't want to come out, you can pinch that and then use the awl again and finish driving the rest of it out. Pretty cool, huh? So the holes are completely intact, and if we want to put a new rivet in, let's do it. We'll set it again just for fun. There you go. Now you know how to remove rivets. And by the way, double capped is probably not the most accurate way to describe these. These are more accurately called quick rivets or rapid rivets. All right. Moving on to the next thing, we're going to talk about single capped rivets, or what I called single capped rivets. They're actually called tubular rivets. So in the earlier part of the video when I showed you how to trim your double cap rivets to make them fit on thin material, the other option is to use a single capped or tubular rivet. They work great for thinner material, for lighter materials. In the first video, I showed you how to set those using the snap setting tool. And that probably wasn't fair. It will work, it will get them set, but it's not the ideal setting tool for this. Now, when we compare double caps to tubular rivets, double capped rivets are much cheaper to set. When you start getting into these types of rivets that I'm going to show you, sometimes you need extra tools, and sometimes those tools will need to change based on the diameter of the cap that you're setting. Okay, so for single capped rivets, I want to show you a nifty little die. It's called a splash die, and it's this piece here that makes it a splash die. And you can pick one of these up, by the way. You're going to ask me where I got it. You can get it at buckleguy.com. But this does a different function than what I showed you in the previous video. What this does to tubular rivets is it splits the barrel open and gives it sort of a star formation. And it's really easy to use. I really like it. It looks really nice. So let's try one of those. And I'm using black leather, but it's the same stuff as this other thinner material. So we put the post in. Let's do it this way. There. So instead of turning it upside down, we put this right on here. Now this has a point. I don't know if you can see that. I'll try to zoom in. But that has a point. You want to make sure that this goes right onto that and rests right on there. And then you just take your concave tool and it does a great job of opening up that rivet and holding it very well. Now, if you don't like the way that feels, get your anvil, put it back down there and hit it one more time, and that will flatten it out on the underside. See, don't that look nice? It's very smooth. So you can use a tubular rivet in cases where your posts are too long on a double capped rivet. It's also not accurate to call these single capped rivets because there is a cap that you can fit onto these. It functions differently than the double cap, than the quick rivets, and we use a similar die that fits in here, and this is perfect. This is what I was talking about. So when you're getting into these tubulars, sometimes you need specialized tools based on the size of your caps, and this is one of those examples. So if you wanted to put a double cap, if you wanted to make a tubular rivet a double cap, here is the approach. We're going to take more of that leather. Oops. I'll treat you to one more hole punch. Not lined up very well, but oh well. And this time we lay it down like that. We're going to put the cap on top. I'll get a close-up of these caps. The way that they work is very similar to the splash die. It has a sort of a center point that splits the tube open, and it kind of tucks it into the edge of the cap. You use a little bit different tool. You kind of load it into this end here, which has a rubber hose attached to it, or a rubber piece that keeps it from falling out. And then it self-centers, and you just hit it, just like you would the concave tool. Takes a little more pull. Oh, we didn't get it. Oh, I don't think I hit it hard enough. Let's try it again. Here we go. There. The brass on a tubular rivet tends to be a heavier gauge, so sometimes you do need a little more effort to get those to move. So there you go. Now you have a double capped tubular rivet. All right, well that's it for rivets. You now know everything I know about setting rivets. I'm Matt Rizak from leatherpunk.com. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. See you next time. Yeah, I'm back. Do you have that in cornflower blue? Fantastic.